Greetings, comrades. Thank you for your hard work, comrades.
Do you still remember this scene? Troops in full formation, red flags fluttering. In 1998, a once-in-a-century catastrophic flood swept across half of China. I want to ask you, if the flood is the enemy, then what are our weapons? This movie gives an answer in just 3 words: flesh and blood. The summer of 1998 was a time when the land wept, and a time when the Chinese people stood strongest. The Yangtze River was in peril. Floods raged and monstrous waves destroyed homes for thousands of miles. River embankments were on the verge of collapse. At the word of command, thousands of soldiers and civilians charged forward, risking their lives to save the dikes and the people. These aren't special effects. This is a true Chinese miracle. There were no superheroes, only flesh and blood. No retreat, only the vow to hold the line at all costs. They too were someone's children, yet in the deadliest places they gave the hope of life to the people. This is the only Chinese film that truly captures the weight of the term human war, portraying it with the strength of reinforced concrete. A life and death struggle against nature, a soul-stirring epic of flood fighting. Today, let's step into the world on the occasion of the Great Tide to revisit that heart-pounding summer Ying and see how ordinary those heroes were before they rose to the occasion. After this film, you will truly understand the meaning of being a soldier. In the summer of 1998, a heroic unit fought across Jiangxi and Hunan provinces for 3 months, battling raging floods and achieving great distinction. Before the soldiers could even wash off the dust of battle, a final order was issued: immediately deployed to Hebei to defend the Lingshui section of the Jingjiang Dike. At the solemn and stirring, oath-taking rally, Army Commander Zhang Zeiming did not conduct a conventional pre-battle mobilization. Instead, he sternly rebuked his own son, Zhang Chengwen, in front of the entire assembly.
Company Commander Zhang Chengwen, 4th Company 2nd Battalion, 1st Regiment, stepped forward. It was this very company commander Zhang during the emergency operations at Qinglongtan on the 15th who unilaterally altered the route of maneuver, causing the unit to arrive 10 minutes late. Flood fighting is war. Time determines victory or defeat. All commanders must bear this in mind. You, Zhang Chengwen, think that just because the mission is over, you can head home to look for a job, regardless of your future path. To think only of your own prospects at a time like this makes you a deserter.
This criticism left Zhang Chengwen deeply aggrieved and bewildered. He answered the nation's call to enlist, and now that his term of service was up, was it so wrong to seek a transfer to pursue his own dreams? A prestigious company had already extended an olive branch to him, promising him a vice president role. Upon joining, he could finally apply the specialized knowledge he had gained in university. Resentment and confusion churned within him. Just then, urgent news arrived: a piping leak had erupted in the city's embankment. This small hole was like a breach torn open by the flood. If it widened, thousands of citizens downstream would be instantly swallowed by the flood peak. The scene was chaotic, but only Zhang Chengwen knew that to truly stop the piping leak, one must find its source within the river. Without the slightest hesitation, he rushed up the dike and plunged into the churning torrent. Drawing on the skills and expertise he forged in the military, quickly pinpointed the exact location of the piping source, loudly commanding the crowd to block the gap with sandbags. The crisis was finally averted. A girl on the shore gave him a solemn salute. Meanwhile, a dire meteorological report arrived from headquarters. Over the next 10 days, the upper Yangtze will face continuous heavy rainfall. Henan, Shaanxi, and Hubei will be deluged by torrential downpours.
Water levels at Chenglingji will approach the record highs of the great 1954 flood. A massive basin-wide flood. It has become unavoidable.
Before the words had settled, the Mianyang embankment suffered a catastrophic breach. The massive flood peak, laden with silt-uprooted trees and building debris, tumbled toward the village with overwhelming force. In the face of such monstrous natural disaster, humanity seemed so utterly small. To rescue the trapped civilians, Commander Zhang Zaining convened an emergency flood relief meeting, ordering the rescue operation to proceed at all costs. Helicopters lowered ladders amidst the raging storms, while assault boats wove through the crashing waves. Wave after wave of victims were evacuated to safety, but the number of those trapped was staggering. With only raw manpower and basic gear, the rescue forces were stretched to their limits. The soldiers who arrived first leapt from their trucks, and without any protection, they dove into the raging currents to save lives, some even handing over their only life jackets to the victims. After hours of working in the water, the soldiers were nearing total exhaustion. Zhao Jianping, the acting commander of the 4th Company, after saving a civilian, was struck in the back of the head by a drifting timber and lost consciousness, instantly vanishing forever into the murky depths. Witnessing this from afar, his comrades could only cry out his name in anguish. It wasn't that they didn't want to save him, but children were still waiting to be rescued behind them. On one side was a brother in arms, on the other defenseless civilians. Faced with a choice between life and death, Soldier Lin Weikun chose the people without a moment's hesitation, for such is the mission of the people's soldiers. Ultimately, the young boy survived, but Deputy Company Commander Zhao Jianping was lost forever to the icy river waters. The tragic news, Commander Zhang Ziming felt a sharp stab of grief and plunged into endless guilt. Had his son Zhang Chengwen not insisted on leaving the unit, Zhao Jianping would never have stood in the position that should have been his. He resolved to offer a formal apology to the Commander-in-Chief, but at that very moment, flood relief became the overriding priority above all else. With the issuance of a formal appointment, Zhang Ziming was tasked at a moment of crisis, shouldering the immense responsibility of Commander-in-Chief of Flood Control. The ultimate tragedy for a soldier is never the fear of facing death, but rather the inability to uphold the resolve to save everyone trapped helplessly between the demands of duty and the weight of conscience. Meanwhile, Zhang Ziming returned home to confront his son about why he had left the unit. For days, a fire of resentment burned in both their hearts, making their rift difficult to bridge it. His wife tried to mediate, saying that their son was grown and had his own path to follow. These words only served to further infuriate Commander Zhang.
With the great only, even if I had 10 sons, they would have only one choice to go and fight the flood. Zhang Chengwen, you probably have no idea that Zhao Jianping, the acting commander of your 4th Company, and 5 of his soldiers have already given their lives on the moat when you won't die.
That roar was like a thunderbolt from the blue, instantly shattering Zhang Chengwen's stubbornness. He stood frozen, his heart consumed by nothing but remorse and self-reproach. Early the next morning, a college student support team arrived at the 4th Company's camp. Zhang Chengwen, now in civilian clothes within the group, came forward and requested to rejoin the unit. Zhang Ziming looked at his son with a gaze of complex emotions.
I welcome your return to the battlefield, but for now, your rank can only be that of a private. Change out of that summer uniform and into your fatigues. Report to me as a private. Whoa.
Ishiaru hurriedly stepped forward to speak up for him, revealing his heroic feat of risking his life to plug the piping. Knowing the truth, Zhang Ziming was deeply gratified, yet he stood by his principles, distinguishing merit from fault without showing any favoritism. Private Zhang Chengwen accepted the demotion without complaint. Zhang Ziming then picked up the Company 4 roster and began the roll call.
This flood relief has turned into a war. You must remember the 6 comrades who have just fallen. They have not left the company. They are still fighting alongside you. Now, I will begin the roll call.
Zhao Jinping's cry of fear pierced through the heavy clouds. From this moment on, no one would ever walk away. The lives of the fallen will live on through the survivors in another form. Blood fighting is a brutal struggle between life and death. On their shoulders, they carry a national mission and the safety of millions. A new flood peak closes in amid howling winds and torrential rain. Soldiers push their limits in the mud to reinforce the dikes and transport gravel. No one stops from dawn till dusk. Not a single drop of water has crossed their lips. When fatigue hits, comrades pour ice-cold water over each other's heads to stay awake. The intense day and night battle repeatedly breaks through human physical limits. Lin Waikun, son of a wealthy family, has fought in the rain for 6 days and nights. Ordered by the captain to rest, he smiles and agrees only to dive back into the fray. His figure grew more unsteady, his steps heavier, and his vision began to blur. Time and again, he fell only to stand back up once more until everything before him faded into darkness, and he finally collapsed into the mud, never to wake again. Only when his comrades returned his belongings did they learn he came from a billionaire family. He had endless paths before him, yet he chose the most treacherous one of all, to protect the land of his motherland with his very life. Soon after, another upright figure appeared on this land. Lin Tongsheng, a former billionaire and father of the martyr Lin Waikun. Heartbroken by his son's sacrifice for the country, he still chose to uphold the greater good. He resolutely donned his son's military uniform, fulfilling his son's unfinished mission in his stead.
Old Lin, what are you doing here?
The day Waikun joined the party.
He wrote me a letter. He sacrificed himself just 8 days after joining the party.
Commander Sam, I want to finish it for him. The task he left unfinished.
You're a veteran. You are qualified. Born in.
Meanwhile, Old Wai, having just finished unloading gravel, threw himself back into the fray. After days of continuous fighting, he didn't even have a moment to lie down for a nap. During a shift break, Old Wai had just sat down to grab a few bites of dry rations before getting up to find a place to relieve himself. Suddenly, he spotted a hole by the road, gushing out muddy water. He was instantly alert.
Does that look like a piping leak to you? Or, forget it, they're going to divert the flood anyway. We're close to the diversion zone. Consider it just another blast point for the diversion. You fool. What if they don't... What then?
He urgently called for his comrades to report the leak as he rushed toward the truck. But after days of extreme exhaustion, he no longer had the strength to lift the heavy sack of corn. Desperate, he sliced open the bag to pour out half of the load. Clutching the bag, he plunged from the dike into the raging river. The underwater currents were fierce, and the vortex of the piping hole kept widening. At the end of his strength, he made the most heroic decision to block the breach with his own body. He wasn't afraid of death. He only grieved that he couldn't say goodbye to his grandmother. By the time Company Commander Zhang Shengwen rushed to the riverbank, only a military cap remained. Heartbroken, he stripped and dove into the river, but it was already too late. With his own flesh and blood veteran, Wai built the final line of defense for the dike. At dusk, when Wai's body was carried home, his blind grandmother already sensed the tragedy, yet she could not see the surrounding grief or the black and white funeral banners. Clutching a kernel of corn, she still waited for those 3 familiar honks. On every trip home in the past, Old Wei would honk his horn to signal his safe return. Grandma, every time she heard those 3 sounds, she would smile and set aside a kernel, tallying another successful load for her grandson. Grandma always said, as long as the people's soldiers are here, I am safe. Yet her heart's deepest concern was her only living kin. However, the horn today was not just 3 short honks, but a chorus of long blares echoing across the mountains and through the skies. Grandma stood up tremblingly, the corn kernels scattering all over the floor. Her grandson would never come home. The 1975 flood took her son from her. The women of the family cried until they went blind. The 1998 flood has now taken her only grandson. These 3 honks serve as the most heartbreaking foreshadowing in the film, transitioning from everyday warmth to ultimate tragedy. The director uses auditory symbols to create a most poignant contrast as the three sirens swell into a roar from 10,000 vehicles. It is the highest tribute from comrades to a civilian hero and the most furious indictment against the natural disaster veteran. Bai was just an ordinary soldier, exhausted and unassuming, but it was this most ordinary flesh and blood that erupted with divine courage. At the moment of life and death, locking the piping with his own body, he wrote a soldier's epic in the mud, the most profound physical manifestation of devotion to the nation. As a final week of high-intensity, widespread rainfall struck on the fifth historic crest of the Yangtze River, officially formed water levels near the 1945 record highs. The entire line was in peril. Flood fighting and rescue reached a harrowing, decisive moment. Engineers had prepared explosives ready to blast for flood diversion at any time. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were evacuated overnight, and the atmosphere in the headquarters was suffocating. However, the water experts proposed a risky plan. Avoid flood diversion. Instead, let his own Gehayan reservoir store water beyond its capacity, forcing it to hold double the volume to delay the crest and save the downstream. But if the dam fails, not only is the 580 million ton reservoir lost, but the downstream faces total catastrophe. Academician Han's daughter begged him to leave, but he had already made his will.
My personal honor and my very life compared to the critical decision of flood diversion are truly insignificant. There are only two possible outcomes. Either I stand firm with the reservoir, or I go down with it.
If the flood is diverted, now direct losses will exceed 10 billion, leaving millions of people homeless. At this crossroads where the fates of millions hung in the balance, Zhang Ziming stepped forward, representing 30 People Soldiers to take on this near impossible mission.
Academician Han, tell us how the troops should coordinate.
Yes.
If the reservoir were to fail, the Ling Shui section would face the greatest pressure. As long as the Ling Shui dike holds, there will be no need for flood diversion. But to ensure absolute safety, within the next 48 hours, the sub-dikes of the Ling Shui dike must be raised and reinforced by 30 cm. The entire burden now rests on the shoulders of the plow.
Within 48 hours, we will raise and reinforce the Ling Shui sub-dikes by 30 centimeters.
As the water level neared its limit, Academician Han resolute pressed the spillway release button. The raging floodwaters roared out like a savage beast, while he himself, exhausted from days of overwork, collapsed upon the dam. In the dead of night, amidst a torrential downpour, Zhang Ziming received a call from the High Commander.
Can the Ling Shui section be held? This is a matter of national importance. The CMC leaders here have only one question for you. If we do not divert the flood, how certain are you that you can hold Ling Shui?
Facing this once-in-a-century flood demon, he remained silent for 3 minutes. Gazing out the window, he saw countless soldiers carrying sandbags, clutching torches, falling in the heavy rain, and picking themselves up time and again. His gaze became steely and resolute once more.
Commander, I have only one answer. We will hold together with my 30 troops and 100 militia. I am prepared to give our lives to honor that pledge.
Yet the cruelty of nature was far more violent than anyone could have imagined. The moment everyone feared finally arrived. The flood peak tore through the embankment with brute force, creating a terrifying breach as water surged through like a cascading waterfall. The sandbags tossed in were instantly swallowed, a drop in the bucket. Conventional flood control measures had failed. Zhang Ziming issued a final, tragically heroic order. Seal the breach with military trucks fully loaded with stone. Zhang Chengbin took the lead, flooring the accelerator at the risk of his life, driving the heavy truck toward the roaring breach at the moment of the plunge. He leaped for his life, but one truck was far from enough. At this critical juncture, Commander Zhou Shangwu rushed forward. His wife had begged him to stay safe, but now he had already put his life on the line. To avoid being trapped, he first reversed to smash off the driver's side door, then shifted to the highest gear and slammed the gas. With eyes burning, with resolve, man and machine became a heavy shell, plunging straight into the raging flood peak. The truck wedged perfectly into the most critical part of the breach, and the raging torrent was finally halted for a moment. Fortunately, Commander Zhou sustained only minor injuries. Buying precious time with their lives, thousands of soldiers locked arms, stepped resolutely into the river, using their own bodies to form a second human wall around the trucks, shielding their comrades as they frantically stacked sandbags behind them. As the first light of dawn pierced the heavy clouds, the monstrous flood was finally tamed. The dike was covered with exhausted soldiers, sleeping on the bare ground, in each other's arms. After more than 200 grueling days and nights, this iron division, forged with blood and sacrifice, finally saved the homes of nearly 1 million people, winning an unprecedented and devastatingly hard-fought victory. The locals spontaneously gather to celebrate the pier as the camera slowly lingers on the soldiers' hands, mangled and scarred with black mud and coarse sand from the riverbed, embedded deep under their fingernails. These hands could hoist 100-pound sandbags, yet now they tremble, unable to even steady a cup of celebratory wine. This scene brought tears to a veteran who had bled amidst the hail of bullets in the Korean War, but never shed a tear until now, as he breaks down in tears.
Soldiers of the 90s, they can fight too. Yes, now, we can rest easy. You are also the most beloved ones. Yes, the most beloved ones.
Peaceful times are never a given. Someone once shielded us from the raging storms. Someone stands guard over the peace of every home. Within those stormy waves lies the most unyielding backbone of the Chinese people and the most fervent sense of duty to their nation. After watching the stormy waves, my heart is heavy with a mixture of shock and awe. Set against the 1998 floods, this film doesn't glorify individual heroism. Instead, it focuses on ordinary people battling fate amidst the catastrophic floods. What breaks my heart most is the sacrifice of these flesh and blood heroes. Lin Baiquan, the son of a wealthy businessman, fought for 6 days and nights. Young transport soldier Wai Changsheng, to plug a piping leak, was swallowed by the river. His blind mother will forever wait for a son who never returns. They were just ordinary people, yet in the face of despair, they unleashed a power greater than life itself. What moved me most was this greatness found within the ordinary, whether they were officers, civilians, or experts. In the face of peril, they all chose the greater good over their own interests. That unified will to hold the line at all costs saved the spirit of flood, fighting a human face, one covered in mud and grit, hands worn raw with blood blisters, and those resounding words, "We can hold it, we will hold the line." This film is more than just nostalgia. It serves as a reminder that behind our peaceful lives, there are always those bearing the heavy burden for us.